How many of you in here thought to yourselves when you were starting out in your career, maybe many years ago, emotional connectedness? Now, that's what's going to help me build my business. Probably not many of you. In fact, right now, you probably are thinking, I don't know about this. But actually, a recent study by UBS and New York Life shows that wealth managers who are able to connect with their clients on a more deeper level, they will be more successful with building that long-term relationship. So I know this is easier said than done. So we have this terrific panel here today that we're going to walk you through just how to achieve this and really build that long-term relationship with your clients. So Susan Daugherty, she's the CEO of Canyon Ranch, and before this, she actually worked for 3 decades as an executive for General Motors. Now, she also is one of the leading executives behind the TARP bailout, so imagine when you talk about stress, what that was like for her. We also have Cindy Baier. She is the CEO of Brookdale Senior Living, the largest operator of senior living communities throughout the United States. Now, Cindy knows a thing or two about longevity. And we also have Laura Kane. So she's the Chief Investment Officer for UBS Wealth Management Research, and she specializes in sustainable and impact investing, which we'll be talking about how that aligns with your clients' values. But first, I want to start with you, Cindy, because it used to be when people turned 50, they were thinking about retirement. But how many of you here in the audience know someone that they're in their late 60s and they're like, I'm reinventing myself. I'm starting entire new careers. So I think we all know somebody like that because women are living a lot longer nowadays. So how is longevity redefining aging and retirement planning?
So I think life is about living the best life that's possible for you. And we deal with more seniors than anyone else in the US. And what we find is what seniors want is to live a purposeful life. They want to live the best life that's possible for them as they define it. And what we find is that they're finding purpose in life through work, through volunteer, through social connections. They're working very hard to stay healthy through meditation and exercise programs. But it's important to know that many of the generation that we are serving today, the silent generation, they have the benefits of pensions and high income. And I was a little worried this morning on the panel with only 2 to 3% of your clients saving. So I think you have a very serious obligation and opportunity to make sure that your clients understand retirement is a long time, right? 35, 40 years. And funding that, it's important to know that you want to live a life that is enjoyable to you, that brings purpose and passion to you. And the only way to do that is to start funding earlier.
And Susan, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I do. I think your comments are spot on. And one of the things that we talk about with our guests at Canyon Ranch is this whole idea of transformative wellness to live your fullest life. And our mantra has always been living younger, longer. And we talk with our guests about the fact that there is a very real possibility that you are going to live to 100, particularly our female guests that make up about 75% of our audience. And walking them through and helping them through that journey in a collective group of women has been very powerful for us.
And Laura?
Yeah, sure. I would add, being able to live this very purposeful, high-quality life in retirement is, of course, tied to your financial health as well at that point in time. And what we're seeing is that longevity is of particular concern for women. So, Nicole, as you mentioned, women are living longer than men by about 5 years. About 80% of 100-plus-year-olds are women. So what we're seeing is that women have a greater risk of being alone at the end of their life and being solely responsible for their financial wellness. About 8 out of 10 women will be in this situation. So what we're seeing is that retirement planning is becoming more and more critical as women are living longer and want to live a high-quality life into their later years.
Yeah, and also reports show that over 75% of adults are weighed down by some form of debt. Cindy, you were mentioning meditation. So can you give me an example of how mental and emotional stress affects financial health, and how can you use mindfulness to to help you with your wealth?
So absolutely. Mindfulness helps you be more purposeful about your goals and about controlling your emotions. And one of the things I wanted to emphasize from your point earlier, 1 out of 3 seniors feels lonely, right? And they feel lonely because if they are aging at home, their world gets smaller. But the benefit of planning for retirement is that your world can expand, right, in retirement, because you can have the ability to live a life in a community with like-minded individuals. You can have that social connection. You can practice mindfulness and education and exercise so that you can really live a very wonderful life in retirement. But if you don't plan ahead, you can be subject to a smaller world that's very lonely.
And Susan, Canyon Ranch has been around for a very long time.
4 decades.
So how have some of the classes there changed, and how are you helping women with education, understanding their financial wealth and health?
Yeah, great comment, Nicole. A lot of the conversation that we have about women is that they are absolutely feeling burnt out, overwhelmed, and you might want to think about this as a metaphor of a snow globe. And when you take a snow globe and you shake it all up, you really are not in control of all of the things that are incoming. And part of the conversation that we have to have with everyone who comes to Canyon Ranch is that you need to get back into control. You need to have the ability to put down the snow globe. And as things settle, and this is a metaphor for what we do with meditation and mindfulness, is that as that snow globe settles, with that stillness comes clarity. And that becomes very important in the world that we're all living in that's very busy, where we're constantly being bombarded with emails and information for which we're not sure what's relevant and what isn't relevant. So we have added, based on demand from our guests, courses on going for gold, understanding your financial best. The beauty of women coming together and trusting one another in an environment like Canyon Ranch, where we have this safe sanctuary, and they have an opportunity to hear from what we call wellness architects, who are experts like people in this room about various topics, really allows them to have a 360-degree view of being able to manage not only their financial health, but their personal health as well, because both of those things emotionally need to be balanced, because when one is out of balance, whether it's your personal health or your financial health, it's a huge stressor.
Now, speaking of stress, we also want to hear from you, because you all have been voting on the polls all day. So if you haven't yet downloaded the app, just go to your web browser, type in inspiredinvesting.app. So everybody should be typing in their web browser if you don't already have it saved to your home screen. So we're going to actually ask you your thoughts about stress. So the question that we have today is, which is the leading cause of stress for women? And we all want to hear from you. What do you think is the leading cause of stress for women? Is it A, financial uncertainty, B, not enough time with family, C, working a job that clashes with your values, or D, too much work and too little time? So all of you can be voting right now. Remember, just go to your web browser, type in inspiredinvesting.app. I know it does take a little time for the results to get in. It looks like, whoa, a majority of you are saying too much work, too little time. So Susan, let's start with you. Too much work, too little time. I imagine a lot of the women that go to your center, they're trying to figure out, how do I balance burnout? How do I become closer to my family but still manage this very successful career?
Nicole, I got to tell you, I love this poll, because we do a health questionnaire for everyone who comes to Canyon Ranch, both men and women. And the top 4 things that we hear that are stressors for people are management of money, number 1. Number 2 is health-related illnesses, whether that be pain or dealing with disease or illness within the family. It's their careers, which is probably the 4th one here, too much work, too little time. And then 5th, maintaining family relationships in a really overburdened world. All four of those things seem like they line up with exactly what we're seeing here, but we do see money indexing higher with our particular guests.
And would you like to add to that?
I would add to that from a financial perspective. Financial security can alleviate a lot of these stresses. Not all of life's stresses, of course, but we need to start thinking about our portfolios as a source of empowerment. So a paycheck isn't the only source of income. So especially women, if we have our portfolios properly invested, we can reap the benefits of dividends, bond coupons, capital gains, and this can be an extra source of financial security. And then as we have more money at our disposal, we can pay to outsource some of the things that are a burden on us. So paying for childcare, paying for a cleaning service, going on that wellness retreat that can give you some more peace of mind. So fostering your financial health can really help in a lot of these other arenas in terms of being overburdened by a number of life stresses, being in that snow globe, like you said.
But I think that the one thing that I'm sure all three of us will want to comment on is that you need to start early. And starting early, two of us here are parents, bringing your children into that conversation. I didn't get to share this with you, but my husband and I have been clients of UBS for 20 years. And we faithfully meet with UBS every 90 days. Whether it's a good quarter, a bad quarter, whether we have time, or you have to make time to have that conversation. And bringing, we have an only child, bringing her into that conversation as a teenager and knowing who, Rick Davis is from UBS, and bringing her into that conversation is empowering our kids so that they get rid of the black box of what all of that is about and making them be on that journey with you.
Right. That's a really important point. And Cindy, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Well, certainly you have to start early because retirement is a long time. Think about 35 or 40 years as retirement age, and think about the fact that 65% of our residents are women. So if they're not prepared, they're not going to be happy in retirement. They're not going to live their optimal life. But what we like to focus on is really what matters most, right? You can't get everything done. No one ever does. But think about the jobs that you have to do. Think about the resources that you have to do them, whether they're colleagues or coworkers, whether you can outsource if you've got the right resources. And that really will take a lot of stress off of your life. And I think the interesting thing is a lot of the things that we let really bother us aren't really all that important. We're in a relationship business. You're in a relationship business. If you focus on the relationship, you focus on what matters most, you're going to make a bigger difference than if you answer every single email that comes into your email box.
Cindy, you were also saying there's a big misconception when it comes to retirement. People think that the government's going to take care of them, right? And they have to plan in order to downsize. We see right now 3/4 of our baby boomers, they're downsizing their homes. Many of them are moving into senior living communities. So what do you think the biggest misconceptions of retirement are?
I think that people don't really understand what is possible in retirement. And they think about having less expenses. In many cases, it's more expenses because now you finally have the time to pursue the passions that you have in life. And today's generation or today's retirees, they have the benefit of pensions, most of them. They have the benefit of Social Security. And if you look at your clients today, chances are they're dealing with 401k as opposed to a pension, so they have to self-direct their retirement. They are not sure they're going to get Social Security and Medicare. So they really have to have a much different perspective of how much money they're going to need. And a lot of people in retirement do sell their primary asset, which is their home, to fund their retirement. But if you think about what life you want to live, wouldn't it be great if your best life was after your working years ended, where you could truly pursue your passions and be released from things like working and taking care of the house and cooking? Wouldn't that be amazing?
And Laura, interesting study by UBS. This was shocking to me that millennials are the most willing to allow their husbands to make these investment decisions for them. So why is it important for women to control their finances?
Yes, so we are seeing this pattern that over 50% of women defer their long-term financial decision-making to their husbands. And this is even more the case for the millennial generation. So we aren't seeing this cycle stop. And in fact, around 70% of women that we surveyed said that they do expect their spouse to provide financial security for them. So it's critical that we get young women involved in breaking this cycle of financial abdication and deferring their finances to their husbands, because especially as you think of women living longer, they need to start thinking at an early age, what do they want their retirement years to look like? What do they want to be able to do and live their best life, as we've been talking about on this panel? And it's really doesn't have to be a complicated conversation. It's all about thinking about what are your core values? What do you want out of life? Where do you want to be 10, 20 years from now? How do you want to be able to provide for your children? And breaking this cycle by changing the minds of our daughters and having that perpetuate throughout time.
And speaking of values, so what are some of those portfolio considerations that are unique to women?
Sure. So for women, there are a few unique situations that we face throughout life. So one is longevity, which we talked about. The second is our income pattern. So it tends to be less linear than men's. So oftentimes we see women coming in and out of the workforce due to caring for children, and then I think often forgotten going out and taking part-time work because they're burdened by taking care of aging parents as well. So women do tend to have less money saved for retirement, so this is an important consideration. And what we are seeing too is that women tend to be very values oriented. So at UBS, we have sustainable investing capabilities as well to help women reflect their personal values into their portfolios. And this brings another sense of alignment in terms of having, what you believe in your life reflected in how your money is being invested.
I'm glad you mentioned sustainable investing. So can you explain a little bit more about what that is and why it's important to incorporate in your portfolio?
Yeah, so sustainable investing is the hot term right now, and it's being used to describe so many different investment strategies that it's become really confusing about what this means. So I'll break it down into three main strategies that fall under this umbrella of sustainable investing, and each area is aligned with a different motivation. So the first is just you want to sleep better at night, and this lends itself to an exclusionary approach, right? So if you, let's say, are vegan or vegetarian, you might want to take out of your portfolio companies that use animal testing or meat processors, for example. So that's one, and that's kind of the basic level of sustainable investing. The second one is called ESG integration. So E is for environmental, S is social, and G is governance. And this isn't so much about saving the planet. This is about holistically understanding the companies that you're investing in. So it's going beyond the financial statements and understanding, does this company have women on the board? Are they abusing their employees? Because turnover is very expensive. Are they wasting natural resources and impacting their profitability? So all of these factors can lead us to make better investment decisions. So it's not so much about being green in that aspect. Mm-hmm. And then the final one is impact. And impact is where you want to have a specific targeted environmental or social outcome and also have a financial return at the same time. So it's much more purposeful, and that tends to be a little more limited opportunities, more private equity, because you really want to make sure it's not just a kind of incidental effect of your investment. You want to make sure that it's really, you can tie a direct line between the dollars invested and the impact that you're targeting. So that's sustainable investing in 30 seconds. I know it's a lot, but it really just think of it as three different areas, all with different motivations, and there really is something for everyone.
And Susan, I know you actually have courses at Canyon Ranch too that talk a little bit about sustainable investing, but before we talk about that, you do have a major announcement that you wanted to announce on Bloomberg. No one has ever heard this before. It's the first time, so I'll let you make your announcement.
Sure. Well, I thought it was really important, particularly for an audience like this, to talk about the fact that today we're announcing a brand new Canyon Ranch Wellness Retreat that will be located in the Silicon Valley area, actually in Woodside, California. And part of the reason why we're doing this wellness retreat is because people are very time-starved. And this allows us to bring people in on fully curated programs for 3 days, 4 days, or a total of 7 days, where they can come into this marketplace and have an opportunity to reset, reboot in an environment that's very secure and safe. Think about it as something that's very boutique.
And I'm curious, it's interesting that you launched this retreat in Silicon Valley. I wonder, are there regional differences with women and their behavior? Some people say people in California, they're much more mellow than New Yorkers. But then you're like, well, Silicon Valley, that's where all the tech innovation's happening. People work, 24 hours around the clock. So what are you seeing?
Well, what I would tell you is that our top two markets for guests who come to Canyon Ranch come from the state of New York and the state of California. And we've had a lot of requests from people in the state of California to have something that they can go and drive to where they can step out of their work environment and go and focus for a 3 or 4 day period, because that's the time that they've got allotted. And what we're going to do in this really special environment is to have programs that are curated and are themed. You know, we might focus on brain health. Maybe we're going to focus on longevity or flourishing in the second half of life, like some of the things we've been talking about here. Or how do we prepare our daughters for financial stewardship? It really allows us, with like-minded people, to gather together on a specific theme in a very special environment, and 24 beautiful tree houses that are on stilts, where you can step out of the environment that we're all in and really get focused. So thank you.
It's all about education, de-stressing, and
Correct.
I want to hear from you, Cindy, because we've been talking about this theme that you can't wait until you're retiring to figure out what your retirement is going to look like. How do I downsize my home and move into a senior living community? So what would your advice be for financial planners in the audience if they're working with young women in their 20s and their 30s? How should they be preparing them for their retirement?
So I think the first thing is to arm them with information, right? I think that as I looked at the polls that you had this morning and everybody's focused on the very short here and now, don't let the urgent get in the way of the important, right? Think about what retirement looks like. Think about how long people are going to live in retirement, how much funds are needed, and make sure that there's adequate funds available. You don't want the only investment to be a house, right? You want to have retirement income that includes annual income. Normally our customers have $50,000 or more income, and that allows them to lead an optimum life, which includes physical and purposeful, spiritual, emotional, all of the elements that make life happy. But if you don't focus early enough, you won't be able to achieve what's best for you.
And what are some of the behaviors you're seeing with some of your retirees that it's completely different than years ago?
You know, it's fascinating because technology plays a wonderful role. Today we have seniors who meet their grandchildren for the first time over FaceTime. We also have seniors who design, direct, star in, and create a movie for our Celebrate Aging Film Festival. We had an 80-year-old actress who won one of our awards last year. She had always wanted to be an actress, and she didn't achieve that vision until she was in her 80s. Last week, we celebrated the birthday of Joe Cuba. He was 100 years old, and because of social media that we posted for his request, he wanted to get 100 birthday cards for his birthday. He was a World War II vet. Guess how many cards he got? 55,000
Oh my
cards
God, that's
from
amazing.
all over the world. And that was because of social media and our ability to connect our residents with the broader world. He also got on Good Morning America, as well as the Today Show. He is living on that.
Oh, that's great.
That is incredible. So the last question, what are your top tips for connecting with people? Because that's what we're talking about here to help you build your businesses. If you have that emotional connection, you're not just thinking about, let me present to them some incredible returns, but if you're thinking of what are their values, are there women on the board, you know, this is really what can help you take your business just a step further. So I'll start with you, Laura. What is your top tip for connecting with people when you meet with them for the first time?
Sure, it's all about making that connection, understanding what someone's hopes and fears are. Oftentimes, sharing something about yourself can help open up that conversation. And I think another thing that really resonates is bringing the children into the conversation. So, you know, if you're thinking about financial planning, offering to say, why don't you bring in your son or daughter to start learning about financial planning, understanding the family's finances? I think those things tend to really resonate and start to build that longer relationship.
And Cindy?
I think the relationship is absolutely the most important thing. Take time to be still and listen and really understand what's behind the first response. Usually the first thing that you hear isn't the real motivation, but if you take the time to get to know the person, understand how they're spending their time and what vision they see, after you get through the responsibilities, that is where you'll really build the relationship.
Susan?
One of the things we talk about with our guests each and every day is, in terms of staying connected, you need to unplug to plug in. And putting your cell phone down and having a face-to-face, eye-to-eye conversation with people who mean a lot to you. We're not spending enough time putting our phones down, taking a rest, and making that eye-to-eye connection.
Well, thank you so much. So a major takeaway from today is that emotional connectedness is key to connecting with your clients and building your business. So I hope everybody learned some great things from this panel. Thank you so much to the panel.
Thanks, Nicole.